Nancy Blair, and I've been an active member of the Den. I've been really happy with our Thursday gatherings. And some of you know me, I'm also a registered counseling therapist in Nova Scotia. And I have a master's degree in counseling. I also have a master's degree in environmental studies. I did that, worked in that field at Dalhousie for about, 5 or 6 years, study centers in Indonesia. So I have a strong interest in connecting the psychological with the ecological. And the topic tonight is eco-grief. And I've broken it down into 3 headings. What is eco-grief? How do you recognize eco-grief? And finally, what do we do about eco-grief? Now, simply put, eco-grief is grief over what's happening to the earth, ecology, creation. I usually say creation or God's creation, and that includes humans. And as we're talking about eco-grief, I am talking about the grief that is happening to all of the creation. And remember that we are seeing the just recovery movement, and the environmentalists are major players in that. And in the just recovery, we're looking at all aspects of creation. Now, let's talk about grief in general. When we feel grief, and everyone has, it's hard to get through life without feeling grief, you're experiencing a loss, probably multiple times in your life. And part of our life's work is to learn how to work with that. It can be very tough, particularly if it's what we call complicated grief, and or you're going through that without support, which is really important, of course. In many cases, there are formal supports for grief. Consider when a loved family or friend dies. We've got wakes, funerals, anniversaries, cards, receptions, food. However, there's times when we have what we call disenfranchised grief. And this is grief where the grief is not recognized by society. And there are few, if any, sanctioned ways to express the grief and mourn. Now, I've experienced with that because I'm a certified pet loss and bereavement counselor. And it's only really been the last decade or so when this is accepted by society. Sometimes there's funerals, sometimes there's cards, and people in general know what to say or what to do. But this has only happened in the last few years. And it's been partly because we recognize how important animals are to us. At this time in history, eco-grief is at the very beginning stages of recognition. There are few ways to mourn or even the language to use. How can you say, I'm sorry for your loss of a species? I can't really send a card for that. There are some rituals. For example, there's a November Remembrance Day for species which have been gone extinct, November 30th, and I'm hoping the Den can do something around that day. So it's not established yet, which makes it hard to deal with. The other aspect of eco-grief that is so important for us to remember is that it's not a one-time event. When my father died, he died once, and we grieved. With eco-grief, events keep happening. Considering the UN says that between 150 and 200 species go extinct every day. Now, I've been saying that all week as I prepared, so I can actually say that without kind of being frozen or horrified. But to think about that is incredible. This is the most or the highest rate of extinction since the time of the dinosaurs. So what do we need to put in place so that people can recognize and talk about the grief they're feeling? It's hard to even say some of these things like that number of extinction, let alone process the reality and then grieve. So how do we recognize eco-grief? And I realize this is a really good question. How do you recognize or identify some type of grief that is not really recognized yet? I'll talk about my experience in the fall of 2019. I had about 2 months of extended, overwhelming grief. No one had died recently. People were sick, family, friends. There didn't seem to be any reason. I thought it might have been existential, but that usually doesn't last 2 months. So I looked around. We had Extinction Rebellion. Greta Thunberg was talking, Jane Goodall. And like many of you, or many people, I've been working on these issues for decades, and it was really exciting to see this increase in activity around the issues last fall. And at the same time, we were starting to hear other words more and more frequently, like eco-anxiety, eco-despair, eco-depression. And I was getting more and more interested in this personally and professionally. And I was also wondering if people are not recognizing these feelings for what they are and working them through, that's a lot of grief around that is not being dealt with. And the feelings can be very difficult. So if people are not seeing this grief, they're probably not working them through and coming out the other end. And think about it. As a therapist, I consider this mind-boggling. So if people are not identifying eco-grief, what do they think they're feeling? Sadness, despair, depression. Maybe I thought I was getting old. Maybe thought, I don't know. How do you handle it? Are the people that are having these feelings getting out in nature? Are they working with the Den or Extinction Rebellion? Are they praying? Or are they going to the backup supports and substances that we normally fall to when we want to avoid things, or when we're feeling sad or isolated? Traveling, alcohol and drugs, shopping, eating. So I've been watching social media and working through this. And I've also started to ask clients when it seemed appropriate, are you grieving about what is happening in the earth? And the answer is sometimes yes. So I was starting to put in place that what I was feeling, and I think it was almost an epiphany, this is what I'm feeling. The other thing that I was feeling was incredible anger. Again, no real reason for it. Nothing generally content in life, but incredible anger. So I was working all this through, realizing that yes, I am experiencing eco-grief, and what am I going to do about it? So I did a course with, it's a Charter for Compassionate Education. I've done a couple courses with them. This was on death and grief, climate change. And I learned there a number of things, but two things I wanted to point out is one is their language is starting to be developed that we can use when we're talking about this. The word that I really picked up on was eco-fury. This was the absolute fury of what happened to the earth. That was clearly what I was feeling in the fall. It was way past anger. It's a fury, eco-fury, and I believe a reasonable fury. The other thing they talked about is the need for ritual to mourn. So again, how do we recognize this? And the way I think it now, although it's becoming, once you start looking for it, it is there, like other things that you look for psychologically. But when nothing else seems to fit, and you ask yourself the question, am I grieving for what is happening to the earth? And you say yes, that's what you're going through. As we ask these questions more and more, it gives legitimacy to the type of grief, and we need to do that. So what do we do about eco-grief? I think one way we can do this, and it's coming up in different sources, and I think it's the one that I really support and agree with. Think of eco-grief as a gift. Now we talk of COVID as COVID is kind of ripping apart our society, and I think of eco-grief in that way too. It kind of rips you apart. And you see that many of the things that you turn to in the past are actually part of the problem, which is very, very hard and quite painful. It also, and this is incredibly important, gives us the gift of understanding that we are part of creation, just like the water and the soil, birds, animals, bees, and ticks. And this is crucial for us to understand. We have a place in creation. We need creation in order to live and in order to be fully human. Human civilization has been operating the last couple hundred years as if we were not connected with creation and could do whatever we want. At the same time, we have been living without our place in and the beauty of our connection with creation. No wonder so many people feel lost and unsatisfied with life. Many people are saying that we have time to rectify the situation, but we need to change ourselves and the way we live. This brings us back to eco-grief. And this brings us back where we can see that eco-grief is a wonderful, God-given gift that helps us to see that we are indeed connected to creation, which is a very wonderful thing, and that we love creation. And you'll see in a lot of writing now the expression that we will see if we love creation enough to save us, save ourselves and the rest of creation. Usually when I work with someone who's grieving, one of the key points is that they need to take the time to heal. You see this, please say this. Anyone counseling, counselors say this, take the time to heal. In case of eco-grief, I believe that we must recognize our grief, mourn, and act at the same time. There is no time to sit and heal. We need to heal ourselves as we heal the earth. And perhaps that is the way it was always meant to be. Now, this is what I run into. I always say with clients with pet loss and bereavement counseling, this is the only type of counseling I can do and cry. And apparently eco-grief is the same thing. So again, what do we do? First of all, we need to recognize the urgency and move forward. Second, we need to take action. What we do depends on what we're called to do. Den is a network of people. And as Reverend Marian always says, she and the bishop recognize the importance of building a network so that people can do what they are called to do while working together. Working individually is good. Working together is essential to get the work done, and also because we need the support of working together. Doing action is a way to work through our personal eco-grief. My personal experience is I don't see any way around doing action in order to combat the grief that I feel. So naming it, we need to name eco-grief. What happens to people who don't name their grief? Probably everyone who's listening to this can think of someone who they say, oh, so-and-so never really got over that loss. They got stuck. And this is what my fear is, that if we don't name the grief and help people who are dealing with eco-grief, that they will get stuck as well. So personally, professionally, what am I doing? Well, I'm bringing this into my practice. I work with an eco-psychological framework, which basically says in order to heal the earth, you need to heal yourself. In order to heal yourself, you need to heal the earth. I'm doing some writing. I'm working with the Den. I find the Den incredibly supportive and a wonderful way. The people are great and everyone is coming with their own passions and ideas. And I'm allowing myself to transform and to change as I go through my own eco-grief. And I think this is completely important. Again, people realize that with grief, one of the things that happens is as you grieve, you change. And we will change, I think, in a really wonderful way. I've talked to Marian. I'm starting a monthly support group for people with eco-grief. I'm throwing that out. I think the first Monday of the month, I'm going to start doing that and see if people are interested in that. So in conclusion, eco-grief is, well, it's a terrible thing. It's also a wonderful thing. And it's a sign, I think, believe, of very great hope. And it is a way to help us deal with what is going on, if we deal with it. So it is a gift. And I believe that we should look at it that way. Thank you.